no society could survive and thrive with the kind of uh, uh, policies and ideas and attitudes that these people promote. And again, we can see that with the climate collapse and with so many things that are going on. There's a brilliant, I believe it was a science fiction writer, but who has this saying that the future is already here. It's just happening at different rates. We have to start saying that's because of them. Right. And when, these things come through with the Trump administration, we need to be able to, point that Trump did this. These people are bringing on the abyss, and we have to stop them.
I use the unified field theory phrase. That was Einstein's dream. But here's another physics, astrophysics thing. The Big Bang of this was a man named James McGill Buchanan, who kind of laid out this roadmap at a couple of Virginia institutions that he founded and directed more than 70 years ago. Who was this man briefly? What did he want? How did he
Yeah.
become this guru?
Yeah, so if you've never heard of him, don't feel bad. I hadn't either when I started on this research. I was not looking for James Buchanan or Charles Koch. I was following the story of massive resistance to school desegregation after the Brown decision and following the efforts of Southern states to privatize education. And I came upon this man, James Buchanan, trained at the University of Chicago, you won't be surprised, who had just gone to the University of Virginia in Charlottesville in 1956 to set up a donor-funded center on campus to advance this set of right-wing ideas. And I ended up kind of following him as he goes forward, is involved with all the major organizations on the front, on the right, gets involved with Charles Koch in reaction to the campus protests of the late 60s, and then worked with every single Koch-funded organization and many of the others on the political right. But what he did that was so powerful is he developed a theory of how government grew over the course of the 20th century and then the 21st. And the idea was that it was basically citizen power, right? Organized citizens who were able to do these things that they called rent seeking, and said that and they come to this as extreme libertarians. So they were saying any of these things that the majority wins without the consent of everyone are necessarily coercive and therefore illegitimate, right? So public education, while Southern, white supremacists are reacting to Brown, well, that's coercive because we don't want to go to public schools. We don't want our children, white children, to sit next to black children. And you go on from there. Social Security, thought it was totally illegitimate, came up with plans to undermine it, Medicare, on and on and on. But what Charles Koch, it wasn't so much Buchanan was involved with all these things, but he was more of an academic. I mean, he was an operator. But actually, Charles, I don't hate to spoil alert on my own book, but Charles Koch kicks him to the side in his own institution, George Mason University, at the end of the story, which Charles Koch now uses as a base for all these operations. But Koch found in these ideas what he called a technology to effect a political change that repeated experience had taught them the vast, overwhelming majority of people did not want, right? So how are you going to impose extreme minoritarian agenda on a majority in a democratic society? Well, that takes some sophisticated thinking and some rules changes. And that's what he got from Buchanan. That's the technology.
One thing you emphasize about Buchanan is that essentially he was an ivory tower guy. He wrote theoretically,
Mhm.
hadn't been tried in practice except Chile, and people can read about that in your book. But doesn't it fly against the realities of human nature? Because he would get offended, Buchanan, whenever anybody talked about the practicalities of this. You said that Reagan came close, but conservatives say he flinched. And you write, in the real world, people created markets, government shaped those markets, always benefiting some groups more than others. But that people think, well, public schools, yeah, we really do. And that rich people should think so too, because it educates their workers, among other things. Public health systems keep their workers healthy and
Yeah.
working better. I think even people like Henry Ford had an understanding of this. So has this ever been applied in the real world in any practical sense, or is just human nature and the sense of reality too much for this abstract, scary theory to apply?
Yeah, I mean, it is just such an extreme form of self-regard and selfishness that it just, was really hard for me to wrap my mind around it. And I think it is for other people. Like, when I travel around the country doing talks about the book, I would always have people, sometimes men, but often women, who think about the next generation and the parents who like, how do these people think they can sustain a society, right? If they do these things. And, again, they are, there's probably nicer other words, but they're so full of themselves. They think that they have the answer, but then they hedge and they say, well, if we don't have the answer, like Peter Thiel took out citizenship in New Zealand. If he wrecks our country, he can go to New Zealand. Other
And
ones will
Elon Musk
say,
can go to Mars.
exactly. I mean, they're all talking about Mars while they wreck our planet, right? So no society could survive and thrive with the kind of uh, uh, policies and ideas and attitudes that these people promote. And again, we can see that with the climate collapse and with so many things that are going on. There's a brilliant, I believe it was a science fiction writer, but who has this saying that the future is already here. It's just happening at different rates. Right. So, I mean, like when you look into those horrible fires, in Los Angeles or what we saw, with the mudslides and the catastrophes that killed over 100 people in Western North Carolina because we're not acting on the climate, we have to start saying that's because of them. Right. And when, these things come through with the Trump administration, we need to be able to, point that Trump did this. These kids who aren't getting their school lunches, the grandparents who don't have meals on wheels, the people whose social security checks aren't coming because they've fired all the competent people who work for government to do that work. These people are bringing on the abyss, and we have to stop them.